Welcome to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. If someone in your life has BPD, you know how difficult it can be, and you need to learn how to heal from those toxic relationships. And that's where this show comes in. Expert education, expert knowledge, expert insight, and delivered with compassion and empathy. With your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, ajmahari. To purchase and book sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. Now your host, ajmahari.
Are you codependent, or do you just care too much? Said another YouTuber in a supposed deep dive into codependency. Honest to Murgatroyd or something, ladies and gentlemen. Are you codependent, or do you just care too much? Well, guess what? Caring too much falls under the definition of what codependency is and what it means and one of its major challenges. So let's really do a deep dive for real, okay? Unlike another YouTuber plays around and doesn't know what they're talking about. So what are the signs? As I've covered and talked about a lot here, but let's do it again. What are the signs of codependency? Because are you thinking you're codependent, or are you just thinking you care too much? People that care too much, people that have toxic empathy, people that give too much, people that don't wait to have any reciprocation or mutuality, that's codependency. Codependency often has you funneling your energy into supporting the people in your life without making space or even considering yourself or what you need for yourself, let alone what you would like to receive back from somebody that you might be giving excessively to, like a person with borderline personality disorder, for example. The main sign of codependency is consistently elevating the need of others above your own, something that is learned in childhood, as codependency is a trauma response to varying degrees for different people and to different degrees of severity from childhood. Codependency isn't just something that there's tendencies to or, quote, traits of, because it's not in the DSM or a proper diagnosis. But codependency, I would liken it to a syndrome of defensive strategy and repetition compulsion, not knowing yourself as well as you need to, because you have unmet needs that are still very much involved in your relationships today, in the here and now, in your adult life, due to codependency that go back to unmet needs in childhood, which could be neglect, it could be abandonment, it could be trauma, it could be something a little less obvious than that, but woundedness in your childhood that is unresolved and now separated from your conscious awareness, from yourself, because when you have codependency, you don't have a healthy relationship to or with yourself. There is a loss of self, and that's before you get into the relationship with a borderline, because then you're totally going to lose yourself even more. Understanding what codependency really is and recognizing the signs that really do fit for you, that you might resonate with if you're not in denial. One of the first signs is really codependency. Big issue is denial. Recognizing the signs of codependency in your behavior is an important first step toward building healthy boundaries and honoring your own needs. And in the case of having been or being in a relationship or an on and off, recycling the relationship with a borderline or even a narcissist, you really need to understand, what did you learn in your childhood, what hurt you, that created a trauma bond that you're now repeating in an unconscious way in an adult relationship. Right before I jump into a codependency, a little bit more about what it is, because I've talked extensively about this on this channel, and I have a podcast where I have only, I think, 8 episodes in it at the moment on codependency, but it's up here on the channel as well, as, you know, you can find that wherever you find podcasts, and it is a deep dive. When I say deep dive, I really mean deep dive. When somebody else out there says it, they barely scratch the surface. Anyway, as to what codependency really is, I have 8 episodes in a podcast that will give you an incredible awareness and amazing information as to what codependency really is. And just before I go any further into what is it again, but to explain it again, I just wanted to say a lot of the comments I continue to get on the YouTube channel, questions really, but there's been a few in a row by the same person recently. One person said, a commenter commented, why do I feel I was not codependent, but rather very independent? First of all, that's a feeling statement, but okay. A commenter commented on the podcast episode of mine that I put up to the YouTube channel, BPD Relationship Dynamics, BPD and Codependence, Projection and Introjection. And this is what I help people to understand and to really, in sessions, deep dive into where in your history, in your childhood, does your codependency come from. It's not always something people can just think about and, are you codependent or do you just care too much? Because if you care too much, basically you're codependent. Because what does caring too much mean, right? You're caring more about somebody else or whatever than yourself. Way too often, and often with somebody with borderline personality disorder. So this commenter's comment is, why do I feel I was not codependent, but rather very independent until I got into a relationship with someone I believe is undiagnosed BPD? I was never codependent in a relationship before this one. I've heard this a lot, so interesting question, people trying to reflect and understand. And the simple answer to why did somebody feel not codependent, but very independent until they got into a relationship with someone with BPD or undiagnosed BPD, patterns of BPD? Well, the answer is simple. It's because, first of all, it's a feeling statement. So why do I feel I was not codependent? That's not a measure of anything really you can hang your hat on to say you weren't codependent. People don't just get codependency when or they're in a relationship with someone with BPD or when they just start or when you've just been ghosted or discarded, splits evaluation by a person with BPD. That triggers codependency that could have been lying somewhat dormant in someone's life, or that somebody wouldn't be recognizing all the other aspects of what codependency really is that they may well have been dealing with in their life, but not to the same extent as when dealing with somebody with BPD in those most unhealthy, unworkable, impossible relationships. So I think this person saying that they felt that they weren't codependent, really independent, till they got in the relationship with someone with BPD, it doesn't mean they weren't codependent. It just means maybe that wasn't very prominent in their relating or in their consciousness, but it was there. And then a lot of people have reported this to me, clients I've worked with over 34 years now in this area, helping people heal, recover, break the trauma bonds, and heal codependency. A lot of people don't think they were codependent till they got in the relationship with a borderline. That this isn't the case, but that will trigger it more and brings to the awareness of a lot of people, at least that resonate with me and listen to my work, about the connection between childhood woundedness, unmet childhood needs, codependency, and ending up in a relationship with somebody with BPD. And the same commenter commented on a podcast episode that I did in the BPD, Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup podcast, that I put the episode up onto the YouTube channel. And a commenter says, why was I begging for them back after absolutely knowing it wouldn't work and wanting to end the relationship? Always going back and wanting to fix things and not give up. Codependency is the answer to that as well. It's the false hope. It's the repetition compulsion cycles of reenacting out childhood woundedness to trauma that now is transferred basically on, in an unconscious way, onto the person with BPD, because they are, to one extent or another, replicating an experience that wounded you in your childhood. So those are just some of the questions that I continue to get on the YouTube channel, no matter how many times I actually explain this. So that's fine. So the bottom line is codependency begins in childhood, does not begin in adulthood. It does not begin after you've been with a person with BPD, but a relationship on and off, limbo, all that stuff with somebody with BPD can definitely trigger it more, and it will bring out a more intense reaction from your codependency, a more intense reaction out of you, or reactions, plural, in many different ways. So what is codependency? Because it's caring too much. That's one example, one definition. But codependency is a way of behaving in relationships where you persistently prioritize someone else over you, and you assess your mood based on how they behave. So you need something from them, which a lot of people with codependency don't realize. You need validation from someone else. You need reassurance from someone else. You care a whole lot, like too much, if somebody likes you or not. So you're looking to others for cues about you in many different domains in your life, because this comes from childhood when you were looking to a parent to meet certain needs or see you or hear you, and maybe they didn't. Maybe you were neglected. Maybe you felt abandoned emotionally. So within all of this, people with codependency are just so focused on others, and the nonsense of the title here, based on what some other YouTuber did, are you codependent or do you just care too much? It's both, because caring too much, like I said, is part of codependency. Codependent traits, for lack of a better way to put it, lead to a disconnect from your own needs and desires, and that might have been the case really for you since childhood, when you might not have consciously ever realized that about emotional needs or the way you might relate to people in your life. Codependent traits promote unhealthy relationship dynamics and affect self-worth, self-esteem, self-trust, and overall well-being. So codependency isn't a state of well-being. So experts originally introduced the term codependency back in the 1940s to help describe specific behavior patterns they noticed in partners and family members of people living with alcohol use disorder, or people that were alcoholics, or we could say substance abusers. But this original definition was really a description of how loved ones enabled alcohol use, and the signs of that was like making excuses, hiding the alcohol use, protecting the person from any fallout or consequences of their actions. Well, these things are happening in a differently described way with people with codependency, because so many of you are getting into relationships with people with BPD or NPD. So today, experts agree that codependency has a more nuanced and complex meaning and can show up in many situations, and not just ones involving substance abuse, but often if you're with a person with BPD or suspected BPD or the patterns of BPD, you're going to be making excuses for them too, mostly to yourself, kidding yourself. You're going to be hiding what's going on in your relationship from your family and your friends, because you all feel shame and embarrassed at the way that they, might be sometimes giving you the silent treatment or often raging at you and splitting you to devaluation and blaming you for everything, and just that whole impossible relational component of being in a trauma bond with a borderline and yourself being a codependent. And you may be protecting that person with BPD from any fallout or consequences of their actions, including the way they're treating you, including the way they don't hear you. Maybe you're in a lot of jade conversations. You're justifying, arguing, defending, and explaining, because the person with BPD isn't going to hear you at all about what you're feeling, how you feel hurt by them, etc. So it's not a huge change to what we know about codependency, but yeah, there's a nuanced and complex meaning now that's well understood. And codependency refers to any enmeshed relationship in which one person loses their sense of independence, or actually enters the relationship without a sense of independence, but you believe, codependent believes they need to tend to someone else. That's what anybody in a relationship with somebody with BPD in any relationship type is doing. You're walking on the eggshells. You're trying not to upset them. You're trying to make it work. Oh, those good times are so good, right? The bad times are just beyond description. And you've known something like that in your childhood to one degree or another, but it may right now well be buried within your unconscious. By the way, I have 34 years experience working with people trying to get out of these relationships with borderlines or narcissists. People who have codependency come to realize that. A lot of people don't realize that if you're in a relationship with a borderline or narcissist, you have codependency. You just might be still in denial. And according to 2018 research, patterns of codependent behavior generally involve 4 main themes. 1, self-sacrifice. 2, a tendency to focus on others. Get obsessed with them and lose yourself entirely in the case of borderlines and narcissists. 3, a need for control, which may fuel conflict. Yes, that's happening from your side of the fence too, just not in the same way as borderlines or narcissists might be doing that. Number 4, difficulty recognizing and expressing your own emotions. These themes can show up in various types of relationships. These themes even show up in how you relate to yourself. You might not have been consciously aware of that. You may still not really understand what that 100% means. And by the way, I'm out here to work with you, if I resonate with you, if you'd like to know more about codependency, and the fact that in relationships that go on or get recycled, or the trauma bonds that get formed between the loved one and the person with BPD, everyone has codependency, because the only really types of people, categories, I don't like to use this language about people, but that borderlines will be in relationship to are narcissists, other cluster Bs, let's say, or codependents. So if you're not a narcissist, you're not a psychopath, you're not a borderline, then ipso facto, trust me, you're a codependent. A lot of people don't want to hear this. A lot of people still denying this, but the longer you deny it, the more you can't break the trauma bond, the more you're not going to get into your own healing and recovery journey, which I'm out here to work with people on if I resonate with you. Codependency is serious and formidable, and it didn't make it into the DSM as its own personality disorder, but it is a trauma response from childhood, or an adverse experience response from childhood, is very wounding. And if you have even one sort of trait or aspect of codependency, it's going to be enough to lead you into a cluster B relationship, a trauma bond you can't get out of, and you'll be caring too much about them and forgetting about yourself and abandoning yourself. So the idea of are you codependent or do you care too much is really a ridiculous statement, but I'm using the title because another YouTuber used the title, and I hope to deliver a lot more substance here than they bothered to bother with. So the main signs of somebody with codependency, how can you know if you really do have this, but you really don't want to admit it or you don't believe so? Common signs of codependency include 1, a deep-seated need for approval from others. 2, self-worth that depends on what others think about you. 3, a habit of taking on more work than you can realistically handle, both to earn praise or lighten a loved one's burden. 4, a tendency to apologize or take on blame in order to keep the peace. 5, a pattern of avoiding conflict. Okay, so another way to put that is being conflict adverse, not knowing how to cope with conflict, and therefore even when you want to say no, you say yes. And even when you might be angry, you don't feel like enough self-trust or enough self-worth to even be able to express that anger, and you're too afraid of consequences from someone else if you were to actually initiate a conversation about how you feel and what you need in a relationship, and especially with a borderline. So your pattern of conflict avoidance leads you to continue to put them first and abandon yourself. Number 6, a tendency to minimize or ignore your own desires, and that can be really to the extreme. Number 7, excessive concern about a loved one's habits or behaviors. Like you're focused on them. Like with borderlines, codependents are obsessed with them. Like you want to get them to therapy, you want to get them to change. All because who you thought they were isn't who they are. You learn after the first evaluation split and many evaluation splits after. And then you're trying to figure out, well, you're trying to get the person back that they really aren't. And, codependency, relating from a codependent place with that history of childhood woundedness and why you have codependency is a really self-defeating exercise, proposition, very painful experience. And yet people with codependency are blaming people with BPD for everything. When you have codependency, you're not responsible for what a borderline or a narcissist does to you, not at all. But you are responsible for why don't you know how to get yourself out of there. Why are you denying the codependency? Why aren't you working with somebody? Number 8, a habit of making decisions for others or trying to, quote, manage, unquote, loved ones. Number 9, a mood that reflects how others feel rather than your own emotions. Number 10, guilt or anxiety when doing something for yourself. 11, doing things you don't really want to do simply to make that borderline happy. 12, idealizing partners or loved ones, often to the point of maintaining relationships that leave you not only unfulfilled, but being treated miserably, horribly, perhaps the way a parent treated you as a child. Maybe you've tucked that away deep down in your unconscious. And number 13, overwhelming fear of rejection or abandonment. And number 14, a fear of intimacy. Number 15 would be an attachment style that's either anxious, avoidant, anxious and avoidant, various different attachment styles, but you will not have a secure attachment style. And then you're trying to relate to somebody with BPD who has disorganized attachment. So they're really not attaching to you, and they don't know how to love you. And people with codependency need to realize that your love isn't altruistic, isn't extra special, because you're giving, while the borderline takes. You don't have a healthy relationship to and with yourself, which means you don't actually love yourself. And that's something else that has to be healed in the process of not only getting out of these relationships and trauma bonds with the people with a person with BPD, but also going on to do more healing and recovery so that you can learn why have you been relating the way you do. It's a mindset of scarcity. It's a mindset of not being good enough, no matter how many attributes you may have or wonderful qualities. And so the reason that codependent personality disorder, which some professionals call it, isn't in the DSM is because in their infinite, quote, wisdom, unquote, sarcasm here, they decided that codependency overlaps too much with borderline personality disorder in cluster B and overlaps too much with dependent personality disorder in cluster C. So codependency is a formidable challenge, kind of like with this name, codependency, and what that really means, but a lot of people don't take it seriously, and a lot of people just continue to deny that they have codependency. And with codependency, the need to support others goes beyond what's generally considered healthy, way beyond that line. If you behave in codependent ways, you don't just offer support temporarily, like if a loved one is facing a setback, something like a physical illness. Instead, you tend to focus on caretaking and caring for others to the point that you begin to define yourself in relation to their needs. So while we're looking at this, are you codependent or do you just care too much? Which is silly because if you care too much, you are codependent. I could go into more about that, but we'll wait and see what kind of questions I get or not, and maybe we'll go from there. Or if you'd like to book a session and really learn about this, I'd be happy to talk to you. Can help people more on a one-to-one basis. So codependency versus dependency. Well, some level of dependency is healthy in relationships, but that's not what we see in people with BPD or NPD, their dependency needs, or people with codependency with dependency needs that I'm not saying is all the same as BPD or NPD. It may be tough to make it through life alone, and most people thrive with companionship and social support, but people with codependency The word co is, or the letters, co is there for a reason, but dependency is a big part of codependency. Codependency, unlike a healthier relationship, is when that caring behavior crosses the line into trying to direct or control someone else. And that would be consciously or unconsciously to get your needs met. Healthier people are independent. Doesn't mean they never need help or support from someone, but it means that when two independent people are in a relationship, like I'm an independent person in a relationship with an independent person, and we come together in interdependency. That's healthy because we are each our own person and we relate in a whole object relational way, which people with BPD are, object other relating, and people with codependency are not valuing themselves enough. It's that low self-worth, low self-esteem, lack of self-trust, that unhealthy relationship to and with yourself that unfortunately comes from your childhood. And it's very different for different people as to what exactly happened in your childhood and why that is. Healthy dependence would mean you state your own needs and desires, ask for support when you find yourself struggling, feel safe and comfortable expressing your needs, let others know when they're asking too much of you without worrying that they'll reject you. So another way to put that is people can support each other, but not at the expense of their own needs. Or you're getting treated terribly and you're giving, and somebody else is just taking. So a couple examples where codependency can become evident. Codependency most often shows up in romantic relationships. And when we're talking in the arena of borderline personality disorder relationships with somebody with BPD, a lot of people with severe codependency end up being the borderline's favorite person also. So codependency can make it difficult to set and maintain healthy boundaries, if in fact you have any boundaries at all. Romantically speaking, relationally speaking, you may have some boundaries in other areas of your life, or you may not. And codependency can make it difficult to validate and protect yourself emotionally, make decisions on your own as well. So as a result, you might go on to pick an emotionally abusive partner or friends, like borderlines or narcissists, have trouble recognizing when you need to protect yourself, and you remain in these dysfunctional relationships, which are very much hurting you. And very much it's not the borderline or narcissist's fault if you remain there. You need to realize this as you come to understand who you're in a relationship with or were in a relationship with, or why you can't get away from a person. Why are you obsessed on a borderline or a narcissist in the betrayal bond of it all? And it really, at the depth of that question, to answer that question, it's codependency, because it sets you up, unfortunately, to continue to take horrible treatment and try to give, because you're trying to fix somebody. You're trying to change them so they can meet your needs and be who you thought they were in the love bombing phase, which is not who the narcissist or the borderline is. And this will harken back to something you experienced with a parent or parents or family members and a parent or parents, where you weren't getting your needs met, you weren't being seen or heard, but you continued to try to placate whatever was going on with them, so you continue to try to get your needs met from a parent. And when we're children, we don't have another choice, do we? This is a survival mechanism. So, for example, in codependency, you may well give up your entire weekend to help a friend move, despite really needing a day to yourself. You might agree to help a coworker with their project, even though it means leaving your own tasks incomplete. You might insist on stepping in to help sort things out every time your sister or your brother has an argument with their partner. You may have trouble making decisions, where to live, whether to pursue a new career, when to spend time with friends. Do you ever spend time alone? Because a lot of people with codependency really don't like to be alone. Some people, it's all right. Some people, they can't stand it. And are you trying to get a borderline into therapy? Are you waiting for them to change back into the love bombing idealizing, mirroring you person that you met. Do you really think they're ever going to be that person? Because they're not, and the relationship isn't working. And codependents hang on because you try to change and fix and rescue them, enmeshed with them, obsessed with them, abandoning yourself. It's really painful stuff. And you worry that you might well worry that your choices might conflict with your partner's needs. And then I mean, like, you don't feel like you have the right, or you're too conflict avoidant, you don't have the assertion skills, etc., to be able to communicate after, not just cave in to what you wanted when your choice be in conflict with your partner's needs, which happens almost all the time with people with BPD. And if you tend toward codependency, this pattern will likely play out again and again. All those sacrifices you make eventually add up. This may leave you drained, overwhelmed, and even resentful or angry. And for a lot of people who can't break these betrayal bonds with a borderline, and the recycling and the trying to go no contact, a lot of people, and I've worked with lots of clients over the years, they just feel like they want to unalive themselves. So you got to be really careful. You got to take care of yourself. You need to get into a healing recovery journey, because that question, are you codependent or do you just care too much? Well, it's both. You're codependent, you care too much, but you don't care enough about yourself because you didn't learn how to in childhood. So what actually causes codependency? Well, like I've said, codependent behaviors are, for the most part, rooted in childhood relationships with your parents and or other caregivers. Experiences in your family of origin can play a major part in lifelong emotional and mental health issues and challenges in adult relationships. Most contributing factors to this condition, and it is known to be a syndrome or a condition of codependency, begin with parents who, for one reason or another, have poor boundaries or lack boundaries. And when your needs continually go unmet, you become unable to assert yourself or even know what you should ask for. Common causes of codependency: 1, physical, emotional, or SA. 2, parents or caregivers that ignore a child's needs in favor of their own. 3, a caregiver with a personality disorder such as borderline, narcissistic, or dependent personality disorder. Could be some other things as well, which may encourage you, or make it impossible for you really, encourages you to suppress your self-identity to accommodate them. And that's loss of self, which there is a degree to that. It varies across different people who have codependency. What else can cause codependency? Controlling overprotective caregivers who prevent a child from learning safe limits and setting healthy boundaries. In other words, they interfere with your ability to be able to grow and be supported and have your needs met so that you can become an autonomous, independent individual. That doesn't happen for people who have codependency. That's what has to happen within the healing and recovery work that I've been doing with clients for 34 years, out here to work with you if you resonate with me. It has to happen in a real deep dive healing process. Codependency is formidable, not taken seriously. You need to take it seriously and don't minimize it. So many people minimize it. Well, it's just codependency. What the heck could that really mean? And another contributing factor to codependency is controlling or overprotective caregivers, and also one or both parents leaving the family, making you afraid of future abandonment and emotional abandonment, even if a parent doesn't leave. Parents that fight a lot. Parents alternating between loving and being present and distant and unavailable, contributing to an anxious attachment. The hot and the cold parent or parents. And criticism and bullying from parents, siblings, or peers that leaves you with lingering insecurity in relationships and inside of yourself. And with any of the aforementioned circumstances in your childhood, you might grow up believing your own needs don't matter, that you don't matter, that you're not good enough, that there's something inherently wrong with you, or at least that whatever you need can wait. As a result, you learn to ignore what you think, what you feel, what you want, both to keep others happy and to keep them from leaving. So there is a big fear of abandonment within codependency, that doesn't mean you have BPD. Perhaps a primary caregiver living with health or mental health concerns put you in a position where you needed to take care of them. Like maybe literally in all ways, or in the sense that you might have been parentified or infantilized, and that has something to do with emotional incest as well. It's a tremendous wound for people that end up with this adverse response to defend and to survive of codependency. The caretaking behaviors you learn may become so natural that you can't help but carry them into future relationships, likely ending up with a borderline or narcissist, or several relationships with people very much in that trait area, or if not diagnosable or diagnosed. And maybe you learned that neglecting your own needs to please others earned you praise. You might grow up aiming to please everyone in your life so you can hold on to their affection and approval, which can more often than not be very fickle, and in the case of people with BPD, fake to non-existent. And so, is it important to get support for your codependency? Yes, it is, to be able to heal and to be able to go no contact, work your way out of these trauma bonds with cluster Bs in particular. Left unaddressed, codependency can lead to feelings of anxiety or depression, feelings of emptiness, a general sense of powerlessness or helplessness, diminished self-esteem, diminished self-trust, diminished self-worth, diminished self-respect, hopelessness, and absolute burnout. Lacking a clear sense of who you are is at the core of codependency. Now, not to the degree that people with BPD and NPD don't know themselves at all and live entirely through a very strong false self. But people with codependency are living to a degree through a false self also. You are an unintegrated person with parts of yourself from the past that still are living in the past in a wounded way with whatever happened to you in your childhood. So this is shadow work. This is to heal from codependency and to get out of these unhealthy bonds with borderlines and narcissists is really to find yourself, but to find yourself not only again, to find a deeper part of yourself that you really never got to know, and then come home to that self for the first time in your life. And you'll be healing codependency, and you'll be learning autonomy, and you will be learning boundaries and assertion skills, and you will come to realize who you really are. And then you will learn how to love you. And all this is what people need to do in a healing recovery journey. Like, I'm out here to work with you again. If I resonate with you, I've been 34 years experience I have working with clients in this exact area of healing and recovery, so that you can move on in your life where you won't be feeling so lonely and or isolated, whether you even realize that you're feeling lonely and or isolated or not. So therapy is really important for codependency recovery. And recognizing codependency in yourself isn't always a straightforward process, because one of the key things that people with codependency do is deny that they have codependency. So benefits of professional support for codependency. Well, 1, recognizing key signs of codependency and delving into that, understanding that. 2, overcoming people-pleasing tendencies. 3, not caring too much. What does that mean? Toxic empathy, trying to, quote, love somebody when really you're trying to, quote, control something to help yourself out. It's a survival mechanism. 4, addressing related mental health symptoms, including feelings of guilt, anxiety, or depression. Shame wounds, ladies and gentlemen. When we're children and we get a shame wound, we don't just get told, or we don't just hear that we're bad or that we did something bad. We hear that we are bad. And that's a component of codependency as well. As is reconnecting, in the process of healing recovery, I help clients to reconnect with their sense of self in a way that you've probably never known it before. And this is the road to independence, not remaining codependent. And also, you'll learn to set healthy boundaries. You'll understand what happened in your family inner child healing work for integration so that you can move forward without parts of yourself so stuck back in parts of childhood, like an inner child, a young inner child, maybe an inner teen. And what I'm referring to here with parts is like age, stage of woundedness. So if you were wounded at like 4, it's a wounded inner child. Maybe you were wounded again at 8 is another aspect of a phase of development of a woundedness in your inner child. And then there could be an inner teen that gets wounded yet again. So please know I'm out here to work with people who resonate with me. If you're in a relationship with someone with BPD, or maybe you haven't even been for a while, or you just can't break out of that unhealthy betrayal bond, which is very painful. You can't stop ruminating about them, obsessing about them. I've got 34 years experience. We can work it out. I can help you if you resonate with me. People with codependency often minimize it, often believe that you can just deal with like self-help books and or watch videos or whatever and you'll be fine. It's not true. You have deep work to do. It's a process, and it's best people won't get through this process on their own the way that you can when you work with somebody like myself who's an expert in this area. You'll learn so much more about helpful communication techniques that do consider your feelings and your needs. You'll get more comfortable in knowing what your needs are and expressing your needs and being able to ask for support. You'll learn to distinguish healthy independence from codependence. And that's an integrative process, like I said, and people need to do this healing and recovery as a breaking away, like you need it for yourself and going forward in your life to live your best life, but as a breaking away. I'm doing the deep dive for you to understand this. People don't want to hear this. It's painful, but you need to know. I think this will be much more helpful for you if you are ready to face the reality of codependency in your life, because not everybody is. So many people are dancing as fast as they can to minimize codependency. It's a mistake. It will increase your suffering. It will keep you confused. It will keep you lost. It will keep you conflict avoidant. It will keep you self-abandoning. It will keep you increasing your own suffering. And all the while you'll be blaming the borderline of the narcissist. Not that they haven't indeed caused you tremendous pain and suffering. But please hear the difference when I say, once you start to understand that, if you deny codependency and you minimize it, then you're just going to blame the borderline for the rest of what's really your issues and your half of any unhealthy betrayal bond with a cluster B. So you need to know how to recognize your own needs, how to accept support from others, and I definitely give compassionate guidance and support, education, and help people through this process. You can break a pattern of codependency, but to do that, it's not Codependence Anonymous, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just books. It's not just videos or podcasts. It takes real work in a healing and recovery journey, in a therapeutic process, in a safe place where you will have nothing but positive regard and empathy, at least the way I work with clients, in a holistic manner. No blame, no trying to tell people what to do. Really, I listen to my clients, I hear my clients, I see my clients, and I help my clients to heal from codependency, their past, and what they brought unconsciously to getting into a relationship with a borderline or a narcissist, and learning about all that, undoing that, changing that, and healing that is the way to actually break out of the trauma bond with any cluster B and not have to ever endure another one again. People with codependency are people pleasers, enablers, rescuers, fixers. A lot of people explain to me about their codependency. They're just like logical and rational, and why don't these borderlines just make sense? Codependency is a formidable mental health challenge that will keep you, unfortunately, stuck in a trauma bond with a borderline or a narcissist, recycling those relationships, or a lot of people with codependency will if they get discarded by a person with BPD or NPD, they'll just go on to the next person too quickly and think there's nothing wrong with them. And I've had so many clients tell me they've just gone from borderline to borderline to narcissist to borderline, or narcissist to narcissist to narcissist, because until you heal what's broken inside of you, what's wounded from your childhood inside of you, that is known as codependency, there's patterns within codependency. And if you're not consciously aware of what those are and the repetition compulsion cycles, codependency will continue to control your life and run you from cluster B relationship to the next, to the next, to the next, in ways that you will not understand, because you will not consciously know why is this happening to you. And it takes people sometimes 3 of these types of relationships, 2 or 3 of them, not just one sometimes, often, to really understand, wow, I have a part in this. There's something going on inside of me that leads me to be attracted or get involved with these chaotic, impossible people to have relationships with who don't know how to love or attach, borderlines or narcissists. You're attracted as an adult to how that person seems, and they're mirroring you in the love bombing phase. You're attracted to them sexually, the way they look. That's your type. This is a hot guy. This is a hot girl, woman, chick, whatever. Well, okay, that happens in your adult here and now, but there's the unconscious piece of what's happening with your wounded inner child and the wounds that formed the codependency as a survival response in you in your childhood. That's all going on unconsciously. And there is a pull to the conflict, to the drama, in the hopes that it might resolve what happened to you in your childhood that you might not be consciously thinking about at all right now. So, are you codependent, or do you care too much? If you care too much, ipso facto, you're codependent. If you're in a relationship, or you were with somebody with BPD or NPD, or you've had more than one relationship like that, you are a person with codependency. And the sooner that you can, I've tried to deliver this message so many ways softly, right? Now I'm just going to give you the challenge of this information. Because if you continue to deny your codependency, if you continue not to get into a healing recovery journey with somebody who's an expert in this area like myself, if I resonate with you, if you think books and videos and podcasts are going to help you, no. The answer is they simply aren't. And you're going to continue to struggle, and you're going to continue to hurt, and you're going to continue to not understand why, and then you're going to continue to blame it all on the borderline or the narcissist, which I'm not here to defend them. But the point is, the more you blame, just like when people with BPD and NPD blame everybody else, it's not going to help you to break patterns so that you can heal, recover, know yourself like you've never known yourself before for the first time. Find independence, work your way to being an independent human being with autonomy and boundaries and assertion skills, and not living to please everybody else above and beyond yourself, and you will then be ready for finding a healthier person out there to have a relationship with. It is a journey. It isn't painless. It's well worth it. I hope that you found this helpful. And I will continue to talk about this because there's no difference between being, the question, are you a codependent or do you care too much? And when you care too much and you are a codependent, that means you're self-sacrificing yourself, you're abandoning yourself, you're not caring at all about yourself. You're just totally into caring about someone else to try to get your needs met, because that's what you learn in childhood.
You've been listening to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast with your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, ajmahari. For more or get sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. See you next time.